In March 1918, the world was consumed by the fires of World War I. Every headline was dominated by trenches, artillery, and the brutal stalemate in Europe. But out in the deep blue waters of the Atlantic, a different kind of horror was unfolding. One that wouldn't be solved by generals or peace treaties. The USS Cyclops was a titan of its time. A 542-foot Navy collier. A massive coal ship, carrying over 10,000 tons of dense, vital cargo and 306 souls. It was equipped with state-of-the-art wireless radio equipment. It had a seasoned crew. It was built to withstand the punishing waves of the open ocean. Yet, somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore, this floating mountain of steel simply vanished. No distress signal was ever broadcast. No SOS. No frantic final words. When it failed to arrive at its destination, the U.S. Navy launched one of the most extensive search and rescue operations in its history. They found nothing. No oil slick. No floating life jackets. No debris. Not a single wooden splinter from a lifeboat. To this day, it remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history. More than 300 people walked onto that ship, and not a single one was ever seen again. What happens to a giant ship when it disappears without a trace? Is it possible for the ocean to swallow something this big, this fast, without leaving a single clue? Let's dive into the mystery of the USS Cyclops. To understand how terrifying this disappearance was, you have to understand the ship itself. The Cyclops wasn't a fragile wooden sailboat. It was a steel beast. Launched in 1910, it belonged to the Proteus class of colliers. Its job was to feed the fleet, carrying thousands of tons of coal to fuel America's battleships across the globe. It was literally a moving lifeline for the military. In January 1918, the Cyclops was assigned a crucial wartime mission. It was sent from Norfolk, Virginia, down to Brazil to refuel British ships in the South Atlantic. But right from the start of the return journey, things started getting strange. While in Rio de Janeiro, the ship was loaded with a different kind of cargo, 10,800 tons of manganese ore. This is an incredibly dense, heavy mineral used in manufacturing weapons and steel. It was vital for the war effort, but it was also a notoriously difficult cargo to carry. If it shifted during a storm, it could completely destabilize a ship. Furthermore, the ship was overloaded. Before it even left port, reports indicated that the Cyclops was riding dangerously low in the water. And then there was the man in command, Captain George W. Worley. Worley was an eccentric, deeply unpopular figure among the crew. Born in Germany as Johann Georg Wickman, he changed his name when he came to America. Rumors swirled around him constantly. Crew members described him as a brutal taskmaster who would walk around the deck wearing nothing but his underwear and a pistol strapped to his hip. Worse, some suspected his loyalties lay with his birthplace, Germany, rather than the United States. Just before the ship departed, a major mechanical failure occurred. The starboard engine cracked its cylinder. The Cyclops was now forced to limp back toward the United States on just one working engine. Despite the heavy load, the mechanical failure, and an increasingly paranoid crew, Captain Worley pressed on. On February 15th, the Cyclops left Rio. It made a brief, unscheduled stop in Barbados on March 3rd to take on more coal and supplies. The U.S. consul in Barbados, a man named Livingston, noted that the ship was dangerously deep in the water. He was so unsettled by the ship's state and Worley's erratic behavior that he sent an encrypted cable back to Washington, warning them that something felt terribly wrong. He wasn't wrong. On March 4th, the USS Cyclops weighed anchor and sailed out of Barbados, heading for Baltimore. It was the last time the ship would ever be seen by human eyes. The journey from Barbados to Baltimore should have taken about 9 days, even with a damaged engine. The weather along the route was reported to be generally fair, with some rough seas developing later in the week, but nothing an ocean-going vessel of that size couldn't handle. March 13th came and went. No ship. March 15th. Still nothing. Initially, the Navy wasn't panicked. Radio silence was common during wartime to avoid alerting German U-boats to a ship's position. But as the days stretched into weeks, silence turned into dread. By mid-April, the Navy officially declared the ship missing. They launched a massive search operation. Dozens of ships retraced the Cyclops' expected path. They combed the coastlines, searched every island, and scanned the horizon for weeks. If a ship sinks normally, it leaves a scar on the water. Thick oil fields bubble to the surface and coat the waves. Wooden deck chairs, life rings, wooden crates, and cork vests break free and float for weeks. Most tragic of all, bodies are usually recovered. But for the Cyclops, there was absolutely nothing. It was as if the ocean had simply opened up a void and closed it perfectly over the ship. The public was stunned. President Woodrow Wilson famously stated, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." The Virginian Pilot newspaper ran a massive headline, 300 souls on Navy vessel lost without trace. How does a 20,000-ton steel structure disappear into thin air without ever using its wireless radio? Let's look at the leading theories that have kept investigators awake for over a century. The first and most obvious theory at the time was enemy action. This was World War I, after all. German Imperial submarines, the deadly U-boats, were actively hunting Allied shipping lanes in the Atlantic. Did a U-boat torpedo the Cyclops? Or perhaps the ship struck a rogue naval mine? It sounds plausible, but after the war, historians meticulously checked the captured official logs of the German Imperial Navy. Every single submarine patrol, torpedo launch, and minefield deployment was cross-referenced. The result? No German submarine was anywhere near the area at the time. Germany had absolutely no record of attacking the Cyclops, and they certainly wouldn't have kept a successful sinking of a massive U.S. Navy ship a secret. This brings us back to the eccentric Captain Worley. Remember those rumors about his German heritage? Some theorists believe that Worley committed the ultimate act of wartime treason. The theory suggests that he staged a mutiny, murdered anyone who resisted, and intentionally sailed the ship to a neutral port or handed it over to German forces. Others suggest a German saboteur slipped into the cargo hold in Brazil, planting an explosive that detonated the ammunition stores. However, a massive ship cannot hide forever. If the Cyclops had sailed to a port in South America or Europe, it would have been spotted. Furthermore, an explosion large enough to obliterate the ship instantly would have left massive fields of floating debris. Yet nothing was ever found. If it wasn't the war, then it had to be the ship itself. This is the theory favored by modern naval architects and maritime experts, and it is by far the most terrifying. The Cyclops was dealing with a perfect storm of structural failures. It was severely overloaded with 10,000 tons of shifting manganese, or it was operating on only one engine, making it incredibly difficult to maneuver in rough seas. Most importantly, the Proteus-class ships had a fatal design flaw. Because these ships were designed to hold massive amounts of loose cargo like coal, they had long, continuous cargo holds with very few vertical reinforcing walls. Over time, the acidic nature of the coal and moist sea air caused the structural iron beams running along the bottom of the ship to corrode and weaken severely. In fact, two of the Cyclops' sister ships, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus, later vanished in the exact same region during World War II under similar heavy loading conditions. If the Cyclops hit a sudden, violent storm or a rogue wave, the extreme stress on the weakened, corroded center of the ship could have caused it to snap completely in half. If a ship of that design snaps, the heavy manganese ore would drop like a stone, pulling both halves of the ship down to the ocean floor within seconds. The crew wouldn't have had time to reach the lifeboats, and the radio operator wouldn't have had time to send a single line of Morse code. The ship would have become its own iron coffin before anyone realized what was happening. Because the vanishing occurred within the boundaries of what we now call the Bermuda Triangle, the USS Cyclops has become a cornerstone of paranormal lore. Legends of giant sea monsters, alien abductions, and mysterious magnetic anomalies have been used to fill the blank spaces left by history. But the reality is far more tragic. Somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic, miles below the surface, lies the twisted wreckage of a steel giant, holding the answers to a 100-year-old mystery, and the remains of 306 men who were just trying to do their duty and get home. Until that wreckage is found, the fate of the USS Cyclops remains one of the ocean's greatest, most haunting secrets. What do you think happened to the Cyclops? Did it suffer a sudden, catastrophic structural failure? Or is there more to the story of Captain Worley than the history books show? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you want to uncover more historical mysteries and untold stories of the deep, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the Ledger, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.